Imagine this. You spend 10 years paying your parents' mortgage, every month. No missed payments, no complaints. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Then one random Tuesday afternoon, your phone rings, and your mom says 5 words that make your stomach drop. "We sold the house today." At first, you assume she's joking, or maybe she means they're thinking about selling, but then she keeps talking. The paperwork is done, the deal is closed, the money is already gone. And where did it go? Not to you, not even partly to you. Every dollar went to your younger brother. Now pause for a second and ask yourself something honestly. What would you do in that moment? Would you start yelling, demand your money back, cut your family off forever? Because what happened next in this story is something almost nobody expects, and it starts with one word. Okay. But before we get there, you need to understand who Emily Carter is. Emily was 34 years old, living in Denver, working as a senior accountant for a mid-sized logistics company. Her life wasn't flashy. No luxury cars, no expensive vacations. She was the type of person who planned everything: budgets, savings, future investments, the responsible one. And for the past 10 years, she had been quietly sending $1,850 every single month to help her parents keep the house she grew up in. That house wasn't just property, it was memories, birthday dinners in the dining room, late nights studying at the kitchen table, her grandmother's old rocking chair still sitting by the window. Back in 2014, when Emily was 24, her father Robert lost his construction job during a rough economic stretch. Her parents were only 3 months away from foreclosure. The bank was ready to take the house. Emily stepped in. She told them it would just be temporary, a year, maybe 2, but temporary slowly turned into 10 years. 10 years of payments, 10 years of trust. And during all that time, Emily never imagined the biggest threat to that house wouldn't be the bank. It would be her own family. Because on that Tuesday afternoon, while she sat at her desk staring at her phone, her mother continued talking casually. "We needed the money," Linda said. "Jason had an opportunity." Jason, her younger brother, 31 years old, charming, risk-taking, always chasing some new business idea, and apparently, by now he had the money from the house Emily had been paying for. Emily didn't scream. She didn't argue. She didn't even ask questions. She just said 2 letters. "Okay." Then she hung up the phone, sat quietly for about 30 seconds, picked up her phone again, and made one call. What her parents didn't realize was that this story had started years earlier, and Emily had already prepared for the day something like this might happen. Here's the part my parents never knew. For 10 years, Emily wasn't just sending money. She was watching, listening, keeping records. Because the truth is, responsible people don't just throw money into a black hole and hope everything works out, especially not when it's almost $2,000 every month. This all started back in 2014. Emily was only 24 when her father Robert called her late one night. His voice sounded different that evening, heavy, tired. The construction company he worked for had just shut down several projects. Dozens of workers were laid off overnight. Robert was one of them. At the time, her parents were already behind on their mortgage, 3 months late. The bank had started sending foreclosure warnings. Emily still remembers sitting on the edge of her bed after that call, doing the math in her head. The remaining mortgage balance was about $210,000. The monthly payment was $1,850. If no one stepped in, the house would be gone within months. So she made a decision that felt obvious at the time. She would help, not forever, just until her dad got back on his feet. The next weekend, she drove 3 hours to her parents' house and sat at the kitchen table with them. Her mother, Linda, cried when Emily offered. Her father promised it would only be temporary. "We'll figure something out soon," he said. But before agreeing to anything, Emily asked a few simple questions. Who exactly holds the mortgage? What bank is it with? How many years are left? Her parents seemed slightly uncomfortable with the questions. "Don't worry about the paperwork," Linda said with a small laugh. "Just send us the money and we'll handle it." But Emily was an accountant. Details mattered to her, So instead of transferring money to her parents directly, she insisted the payments go straight to the mortgage account, every month, automatic, documented. At first, her parents didn't think much of it. To them, Emily was just being organized. But as the years passed, something else kept happening in the background. Her younger brother Jason kept appearing with new problems. One year, it was a car detailing business that collapsed. Another year, it was cryptocurrency investments that evaporated. Then there was a food truck idea that lasted barely 6 months. Each time, Jason showed up asking for help, and each time, their parents helped him. Meanwhile, Emily kept paying the mortgage, month after month, year after year, 120 payments, more than $222,000. Friends occasionally questioned her about it. "Why are you paying for a house you don't even own?" one coworker asked. Emily always gave the same answer. "It's my parents' home." But around year 2, a small thought started creeping into the back of her mind. What if something goes wrong? What if the house gets sold? What if Jason somehow gets involved? That quiet doubt is what led Emily to do something small, but incredibly important. Something her parents signed without even thinking about it. And years later, that one decision would become the reason Emily didn't panic when she heard the house had been sold. Because the day she hung up after that phone call, she already knew something her parents didn't. She had protection, legal protection, and the person who helped her set it up was the very first person she called that afternoon, a real estate attorney named Daniel Reyes. But when Daniel heard that the house had already been sold, his response wasn't panic, it was something far more surprising. When the lawyer heard the story, he didn't sound surprised. That alone should tell you something, because when most people call an attorney after their parents sell a house behind their back, the response you'd expect is concern, maybe confusion. But Daniel Reyes just listened quietly. No interruptions, no dramatic reactions, just silence as Emily explained everything. The phone call from her mom, the sale of the house, the money going to Jason. When she finished, Daniel asked one simple question. "Did they already close the sale?" Emily leaned back in her office chair and stared at the ceiling. "Yes," she said, "it's done." "And the money?" "Apparently my brother already has it." There was a short pause. Then Daniel said something that completely caught her off guard. "That might actually work in your favor." Now, if you're watching this, you might be wondering the same thing Emily wondered in that moment. How could that possibly help? To understand that, we have to rewind a few years. Back in 2016, Emily had already been paying the mortgage for 2 years. Everything seemed fine on the surface, but something about the arrangement bothered her. She was paying thousands of dollars every year, but legally, she owned nothing. So she scheduled a consultation with Daniel Reyes, a real estate attorney recommended by a coworker. During their first meeting, Daniel asked her a question that most people never think about. "Do you have proof of every payment?" Emily nodded immediately. Of course she did. Bank records, mortgage statements, transfer confirmations, every single payment documented. Daniel reviewed the records carefully, then leaned back in his chair. "You're doing something generous," he said, "but generosity doesn't protect you legally." Then he explained something many homeowners don't realize. If someone contributes significantly to paying off a property over time, they may have what's called an equitable interest in that property. In simple terms, if you help pay for something long enough, you may legally own a portion of it. But proving that later can become messy, unless you prepare in advance. So Daniel helped Emily create something small but powerful, a written financial agreement. It didn't transfer ownership of the house. It didn't threaten her parents. But it clearly stated that if Emily paid the mortgage for more than 5 years, she would gain a documented financial interest tied to the property's value, a kind of safety net. When Emily presented the document to her parents, she framed it casually. "Just something the bank suggested," she said. Linda skimmed it. Robert barely looked at it. They signed, and then forgot it existed. For 8 years, until now. So when Emily called Daniel after the sale, he already knew exactly what that document meant. "You have a claim," he told her, "but there's a complication." The house was already sold. The money was already distributed, which meant recovering it wouldn't be simple. It would require something serious, legal action. Daniel explained the next step calmly. "We're going to file a claim for unjust enrichment and equitable ownership." Emily swallowed. Suing strangers is one thing. Suing your own family is something else entirely. But 10 years of payments and $222,000 wasn't something she could just ignore. So she took a breath and said 2 words. "Do it." Daniel moved quickly. Paperwork was drafted, financial records attached, claims prepared, and exactly 14 days after that phone call, a man walked up the driveway of her parents' house holding a thick envelope. He knocked on the door. When Linda Carter opened it, she thought it was a delivery. Instead, the man asked a simple question. "Are you Linda Carter?" She nodded, and then he handed her the envelope and said 4 words that instantly changed everything. "You've been served." But what happened inside that house after the envelope was opened? No one in the family was ready for it. When my parents opened that envelope, everything unraveled. Linda Carter had expected a package, maybe something Jason ordered online again. Instead, she was holding a thick stack of legal papers with a court stamp on the front. At first, she didn't even understand what she was looking at. Then she saw the name. Emily Carter, her own daughter. Linda's face turned pale. She rushed inside where Robert was sitting in the living room watching television. "You need to look at this," she said, her voice shaking. Robert adjusted his glasses and slowly read through the first page. Civil complaint, financial contribution claim, unjust enrichment, recovery of sale proceeds. Robert leaned back in his chair, stunned. "Emily filed this?" he asked quietly. Linda nodded, already dialing her phone. Across town, Emily's phone lit up. "Oh, Mom calling." She knew exactly why. The moment she answered, the shouting started. "How could you do this to us?" Linda yelled. "We're your parents." Emily stayed calm, almost eerily calm. "I paid the mortgage for 10 years, she said. "You helped your family," Linda snapped. Emily paused for a moment before responding. "I helped the house." That sentence hung in the air like a weight, because deep down, Linda knew it was true. Without Emily's payments, the house would have been gone years ago. But the situation became even more chaotic when Jason walked into the room. Jason Carter was used to problems magically disappearing. His parents had always handled things. But when Linda handed him the lawsuit, his confidence faded quickly. "Wait, what is this?" he asked. Robert answered quietly. "It's from your sister." Jason flipped through the pages, and that's when he saw something that made his stomach drop. His name. Emily's attorney hadn't just filed against the parents. Jason was listed as a defendant too, because he received the money from the house sale, which meant legally he could also be responsible for returning it. Jason grabbed his phone immediately and called Emily. When she answered, his tone was completely different from Linda's. Not angry, panicked. "You're suing me too?" he asked. "You took the money," Emily replied. Jason ran a hand through his hair. "You don't understand. I already used most of it." And that was the moment the situation became truly explosive. Because Jason hadn't been careful with the money, not even close. Nearly $300,000 had already disappeared. A luxury car lease. A risky crypto investment. A fancy downtown office for his new startup idea. Money that legally might not have belonged to him. Within days, the lawsuit created tension inside the Carter family that no one had experienced before. Robert barely spoke. Linda alternated between anger and panic. Jason started realizing that if the court ruled against him, the consequences could be devastating. Asset seizure, debt judgments, even the collapse of his new company. Then something unexpected happened. Robert called Emily late one evening. His voice sounded older than she remembered. "We didn't think you'd fight us," he admitted. Emily's answer was quiet. "You didn't think I mattered." 3 weeks before the first court hearing, the pressure finally reached its breaking point. Jason couldn't sleep. Linda was terrified of losing everything, and Robert realized the lawsuit wasn't going away. So the family did something they had avoided until now. They asked their lawyer to contact Daniel Reyes because they wanted to make an offer, a settlement. But what they offered Emily during that meeting would force everyone in the room to confront a reality none of them wanted to face. The settlement meeting happened on a quiet Thursday morning, not in a courtroom, not in some dramatic legal chamber, just a small conference room inside Daniel Reyes's law office. But the tension inside that room felt heavier than anything a courtroom could create. Emily arrived first. Daniel sat beside her with a neat stack of documents. A few minutes later, the door opened. Linda walked in first, stiff and silent. Robert followed slowly behind her, and Jason came last, looking like he hadn't slept in days. For a moment, nobody spoke, just the sound of chairs sliding across the floor as everyone sat down. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Let's review the numbers," he said calmly. He slid a document across the table. Emily had paid approximately $1,850 every month for 10 years, 120 payments, just over $222,000 toward the mortgage. Daniel then flipped to another page. "The property sold for $465,000, he continued. After paying the remaining mortgage balance, the equity distribution was approximately $427,000. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Daniel tapped the paper lightly. "Based on the financial agreement signed in 2016 and the documented payments, Emily holds a roughly 52% financial interest in that property." He paused. "That places her owed share at approximately $220,000. The number hung in the air like a thundercloud. Jason stared at the table, because everyone in the room already knew the problem. He didn't have the money. Most of it was gone. Crypto losses, business expenses, a luxury car he now deeply regretted leasing. Linda looked furious, not at Jason, at Emily. But anger didn't change legal math, and court was only weeks away. Then something unexpected happened. Robert Carter slowly cleared his throat. For most of this situation, he had stayed quiet, but now he finally spoke. "We'll fix this." Everyone turned toward him. Robert looked at Emily, his expression heavy with regret. "You shouldn't have had to fight for this," he said. Then he explained their proposal. He and Linda owned a small retirement condo they had downsized into after selling the house. They would take out a home equity loan, enough to pay Emily $200,000, not the full $220,000 calculated in court documents, but close enough to settle the case immediately. Jason would then owe that money back to them over time. Linda clearly hated the idea, but legally, their lawyer had already told them the truth. If the case went to court, they could lose far more. Emily sat quietly for several seconds. 10 years, $200,000. Trust that had slowly broken apart. There was no celebration inside her, no victory feeling, just a strange sense of closure. Finally, she nodded. "I'll accept the settlement." Jason looked both relieved and embarrassed. Robert quietly thanked her. Linda said nothing. The paperwork was signed that afternoon, and just like that, the lawsuit ended. But the real lesson of the story didn't come from the legal documents. It came from something Emily realized later. The biggest betrayal wasn't losing the house. It was the assumption that she would never stand up for herself. Her parents thought she would stay quiet. Jason assumed the money was his. They all underestimated the quiet daughter who had been paying attention for 10 years. Because sometimes the most powerful response isn't yelling. It isn't revenge. It's preparation. Emily didn't argue when her mother called. She didn't scream or threaten. She simply picked up her phone and made one call. And 2 weeks later, there was a knock at her parents' door that changed everything. Now here's the question for you. If you were in Emily's position, would you have sued your own parents to get that money back? Or would you have let it go? Tell me honestly in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about real-life betrayal, family drama, and unexpected justice, make sure you subscribe.